Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. So there's been kind of this, I don't know, viral challenge going around in the vinyl community. Initially I was going to kind of skip out on this one, but then like so many people have been doing it and they've made some really interesting videos. And the more I thought about the topic, the more I thought this would be interesting because, so the question is this, right? The what are the 10 most listen to albums in your collection, the 10 albums in your collection that you have listened to the most. And I've seen kind of different interpretations of it. Some people, are kind of focusing on, more recently what I've been listening to. Some people take the long view, like in my whole life, what are the 10 records that I've probably listened to the most? Um, I was watching Norman Maslov the other day, and he was kind of his tack was which records do I just sort of go to and pull out the most when I'm not sure what to listen to? Like, kind of these are my go tos. I mean, however you want to look at it, I guess. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to try and take the longer view, and so I did pick 10 records that I mean haven't kept records, but or like not records, but written records of how much I've listened to this or that, but just kind of looking through everything and what jumps out at me as sort of those ones that have been there the whole time or for a very long time that I can continually go to and all of that. So I've got 10. I'm not ranking them, worst to best or anything like that. I just kind of put them chronologically. I think that's kind of made sense. But I do have three kind of interesting honorable mentions I want to start with because I mean my 10 are all sort of within the rock and roll genre. Um, but I do love blues music. I do love jazz music. Other genres I like. So I thought it would be interesting. Just a couple of honorable mentions. So I pick okay, what which out of my blues records have I gone to the most, and which out of my jazz records and that kind of thing. So maybe start with those. One thing I noticed, and one of the reasons I was a little hesitant to do this video was like, well, isn't it just going to be like your 10 favorite records? Well, actually, no. It's not. I don't know. There might be a couple of these that also would be in my top 10, top 20 favorite records. That would be a whole different video. But actually, most of these are not my favorites, even of that particular artist. Yeah, more than my favorite record. A lot of these I've noticed, I mean, most of them were fall more in the category of they were sort of the gateway records, into these artists or genres or whatever. And probably spent a lot of time with them and then delved into that artist or genre or whatever. So that's kind of what I've noticed about these. Anyway, let's get into it. I'll start with blues. There were two I couldn't decide between because both of these are probably the two blues records that I had listened to the most. This one's definitely a gateway. It would be Stevie Ray Vaughan's "Live Alive." So his first live album, really, I think the only live album that was released in his lifetime. There's been a lot of posthumous releases and whatnot, but this one came out in 1986. He wasn't in great shape. This was recorded, sort of the depths of his drug addiction and all that before he got cleaned up. And I'm gonna be honest, it's not even that great of a I've heard much better live performances from him on subsequent releases. But what this video is about is what records have you listened to the most? And this was my first Stevie Ray Vaughan record. The first record I really explored blues music with. And then from here, again, we talk gateways, right? From here, I was able to kind of launch back in time and discover Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and BB King and Albert King and Freddie King and all these other great earlier blues artists. And this sort of acted as the like I said, the gateway. The other blues record I couldn't. This is probably the one I have listened to the most, which is Robert Cray's "Strong Persuader," which was Oddly enough, the same year. Both of these came out in 1986. Yeah. And yeah, Robert Cray's Strong Persuader is, I probably should just talk about this in its own video. I think it's a phenomenally great record. It's a huge hit. It got Robert Cray on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. When you get blues artists on the cover of Rolling Stone, right? But this was huge. Smoking Gun was a great hit. Real kind of modern sensibilities, but Robert Cray is such a stylish great guitar player, great singer, soulful singer. And yeah, I love this record to death. So those are kind of I guess, the two blues records that I had probably listened to the most, and then opened the door for me to explore a bunch of other blues, including earlier eras, obviously. Jazz, it's pretty easy. I have talked about this record a couple of times, but it is what it is. If I'm going to pick the jazz record I have listened to the most, definitely Ramsey Lewis Trio, The In Crowd, this live record from, was it 65, I believe? Yeah, I think it's 1965. Uh, Again, I've talked about this record multiple times. Just a phenomenal, the jazz trio in a nightclub, and it's recorded so well. You can hear the glasses clink, in the club, and the crowd's all into it. And it's not real complicated jazz. It's real kind of really kind of groovy stuff, but fantastic. And this was my dad's favorite jazz record. In fact, this is his record he gave me. So, I got some personal attachment to it as well. But beyond that, it's just a great, great record. And yeah, probably was my entrance into jazz music in general. I keep saying I'm a big jazz fan. I keep saying I'm going to do some jazz episodes, and we haven't, but we will. One other little kind of honorable mention genre thing here. I wanted to mention this one. This group, Strength in Numbers, the Telluride Sessions from 1989. And this does have I got it signed by Bela Fleck, who's there. This is sort of a super group, this one off. This is the only album they made. It's Edgar Meyer on bass, Sam Bush on mandolin, Bela Fleck on banjo, Jerry Douglas on the dobro, and Mark O'Connor on the acoustic guitar and the fiddle. This record really opened the door to me to sort of modern progressive bluegrass, newgrass they called it, in the 90s. Um, just these phenomenal players who really play these traditional bluegrass instruments, but burst all of the boundaries and do all kinds of experimental stuff, bordering on jazz, really. And from this, I sort of branched out and investigated each of these artists individually. Bela Fleck, of course, is probably the best known of them, and the one that I've spent the most time with. But this kind of started it all. So, all right, let's get into the proper list here. So, like I said, it's not really any ranking, so to speak. I'm just kind of going in generally chronological order of the music. Start with the Rolling Stones' Hot Rocks. 1964 to 71. I think this, for a lot of people, was sort of the gateway to the Rolling Stones. Definitely was for me. I've had this thing forever. And, this really, yeah, just, it's perfect for what it is. I, I spent a lot of time with this before I then sort of delved into the actual Stones records. And so if we were magically timing, time spent with the records, I spent a lot of time with this as my kind of introduction to the Rolling Stones. Next, noticed I've got a lot of live albums. I think live music really grabs me quite a bit. I've got Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Four-Way Street from 1971, I think. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it there, but I think that's about what it was. But yeah, double album. Yes, I listened to the second record, which is the electric side, but this is here because of the first record, which is acoustic. And I just, I don't know how many times I've listened to that first record. It's great because it's got all of them together on songs, and then each one of them gets sort of a solo spotlight. So you really get the individual musical personalities of each of these guys on there, and it's just I don't know, just mesmerized me for a very long time. And again, so it introduced me to all of these guys. Well, I was already into Neil Young, but the others, so going to explore all of the catalogs and all the spin-offs and solo careers and all that kind of stuff. For me, it started with that Four-Way Street. Another live, actually, it's a triple live. The band, The Last Waltz. Now, you can't really talk about this without talking about the movie, the Martin Scorsese directed film. So I'm including views of that film in tallying time spent with this album too, because there was I don't know there was a long period there, I guess in high school when I had it on a VHS tape of the movie, and like every night I kind of went to sleep like watching that and listening to that just over and over, and it's just I mean, we've talked about the Last Waltz several times on this channel. Most of you know what it is. The band is supposed to be, and it kind of was their farewell show of that original, quintet with guests Paul Butterfield, Eric Clapton, Neil Diamond, Bob Dylan, Emmylou Harris, Ronnie Hawkins, Dr. John, Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, Staples, Ringo Starr, Muddy Waters, Ron Wood, and Neil Young. What was great about this is the band tear through their own songs, but then they back up, all of these other artists as well on like a couple of songs from them, and that's just it's one of those few kind of all star things that just like works all the way through. Next, I just talked about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I got to mention Neil Young. This for me is fundamental. Neil Young, Live Rust. Um, Again, another double live album. And I think this is a perfect introduction to Neil Young. I learned how to play my first real songs on guitar listening to this. I think the acoustic Comes a Time on here is the first full song I ever learned how to play on the guitar. Yeah, it's just I can still pull this out and listen to it. Here's another one I've mentioned multiple times, but Man It Works, debut, Business as Usual. I don't know. There are some records, and I've mentioned this, that this is just this unreasonable attachment I have to this group. And of course, the lead singer, Colin Hay, who has embarked on an excellent, lengthy solo career since the demise of this group. Really admire him. And he's still got it too. Man, his voice, he's still great. But there are certain records that you just sort of know every nook and cranny, right? Like every second. And that's this for me. I'm so familiar with every single part of this record that it's just it's it's there. I mean that if I were willing to gamble on just like studio records that I have spent the most time with, that's got to be there. Now next, here's one we just did the 1983 ranking, and this was in there. And I talked about this is U2 War, and I talked about how the all the U2 haters out there, and even the U2 haters, and generally admit this is a great record. This was tough for me. I used to be, still do like them a lot, but used to be a huge U2 fan. Um, this whole series of records, kind of early into the mid, 80s. Yeah, I could have picked from about three of them, but I picked War as the one. All right, another double live. Dire Straits Alchemy. Dire Straits Alchemy. Now, this was before Brothers in Arms came out. So, this is kind of a good summation of that earlier Dire Straits period. Dire Straits Live is a whole totally different animal. Mark Knopfler and those guys like stretch out songs live, add new dynamics. Like for instance, opening with "Once Upon a Time in the West," about 14 minutes on here. On the studio version, it's like a 5 minute song. Uh, the Save Your Souls, a swing is stretched out. Tunnel of Love is just epic on here. Yeah, so I this is live Dire Straits is where it's at. All right, another one I've mentioned a bit. Peter Gabriel's "So." Um, I actually a long time ago I did a whole episode kind of deep dive into this record. So yeah, go back and look at that if you really want to get into it. But I can't recall discovering a record that had such a kind of an emotional, just hit me at the right time when I got this, and it was on cassette initially that I had, and I just listened to it over and over and over again, just everything on there. Love Peter Gabriel, of course. Let's see, two more here. Now this one's a box set. It is. I have to have Springsteen on this list. Springsteen's live 1975-85 box set, 5 record set. This was huge when this came out, if you remember. Now, I'm not saying I've spent all this time, sitting down listening to all 5 records all the way through, but with the 5 record set, it's just picking and choosing, right? But I think cumulatively over time, I spent a lot of time with this. Live Springsteen is where it's at, of course. And in the last decade, he's really opened up the vaults and been very generous in releasing a lot of his live material. But prior to that, this was one of the only official live things you could get for a long time. And so if you wanted the live Springsteen experience and not being able to be at the show, this was it. Right. All right. Last one. I have mentioned, we haven't done these guys yet, but I have mentioned huge fan of the Kinks, and especially that Arista period from they're on Arista Records from about 1977 to about 86. All right. Yeah, 77, 86. Great double album comp, Come Dancing with the Kinks. Just makes all the right decisions from that era. Awesome double album. Man, I love that era. I know it's not their most important era, their most celebrated era, their most creative era, but that was my gateway. This was my gateway. That was my gateway into the Kinks. That era. That era was so good that in the early '80s when I discovered the Kinks, and it was through this then recent material or then current material, and it was so good. Usually kind of a legacy band like that, it's like, oh yeah, you like their later stuff, but it's really because of those emotional ties to their heyday, right? For me, not so on this because I had no idea of the history of the Kinks when I discovered this. I just thought they were a new, recent, current band, and I love this stuff. And only then did I investigate and discover this whole history, with the Kinks and all that. So yeah, this one definitely I spent a lot of time with this. Well, all right, that was kind of fun. So yeah, so those are the why. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to pick. Yeah, I mean, I could have. If you gave me 100 slots, I would still, be struggling. What 100 would I have I listed most? But anyway, that was fun. So, yeah, just go watch a bunch of other videos because most channels that I watch regularly have done this challenge. It's kind of the one that everyone's doing, and it's been real interesting videos. So, anyway, we will see you next time. Please do subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, all that great stuff, and we'll see you next time.